Hello and welcome to Success Stories, Saturday, August 26th, 2017. Steve Sipress here. As always, I start out by sharing one of the rhinos from my collection of about 1,000 rhinos. And today is this very cool rhino belt buckle, modeled after an Indian rhino, for those of you who are rhino aficionados or fans like myself. And you can see on the back, it's got the little piece that goes into the hole, and then the loop that goes in the belt. And so it is a belt for a rhino, otherwise known as a champion belt. And of course, the reason I allude to the belt and the champion belt is because in about an hour from now, we have the fight of the century, or the 15th or the 20th, or one out of 1,000 fights of the century that there have been and will be in this century and any other. But this one is different than usual boxing matches, because tonight we're going to find out if it's possible for a champion boxer to possibly lose a boxing match to someone who has never been in a boxing match in his life. I kid you not. That's actually what's happening tonight, is someone who is a champion boxer and like one of the greatest living boxers, one of the all-time, blah, 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 depending on who you believe or what you read or whatever, against someone who's never boxed in a boxing match ever in his life. And so I am looking forward to Tom Brady taking on LeBron James in basketball, and I'm looking forward to all kinds of other great mismatches of people who are good athletes in their sport suddenly believing they can take on someone who's a champion in another sport, and thus the championship belt of rhino that I showed today. But real quick, just give you a little rundown on the early life of today's success story subject, Tony Robbins, who I'm sure if you're watching this, you're a business owner or entrepreneur, and you must have heard of him. If not, look it up. Look him up anyway, because always on Success Story Saturday, when I tell a story, it's just scratching the surface of the success story subject of the day, and you might want to look them up. And today we have technology, and if you're watching this, you're likely on a computer somewhere. You can look them up on a computer, which has all kinds of knowledge on it. And Tony Robbins and anybody else has all kinds of varying stories and dates and times of things happening, and maybe it's myth, maybe it's legend, but as the story goes, Tony Robbins, first of all, was born Anthony Mihaljevic. So he was not born as Tony Robbins, but he grew up in a very troubled upbringing. His mom, their parents were divorced when he was a young kid, and his mom remarried several times. And one of these husbands and men that came and went out of Tony Robbins' life adopted him when he was 12, and his name was Jim Robbins. So he became Tony Robbins. He left home as soon as he graduated high school. He was voted the president of his class his senior year in high school, by the way, foreboding things to come as a leader. Left home at 17, went out on his own, still broke, still having a tough life. It's not like he went out and became a millionaire right away. Legend has it he worked as a janitor for $40 a week. But he saved up and paid the turning point in his life is he basically paid a week's salary, $35 at a time he was making $40 a week, for a Jim Rohn motivational tape. And there's another name you ought to look up, Jim Rohn, who was a business philosopher. Maybe the only one ever, but he's known as a business philosopher. And Tony Robbins bought his 3-hour seminar on cassettes for $35. And then he went to meet Jim Rohn and ask him for a job. And he started out selling those very tapes and promoting Jim Rohn's motivational seminars. So he got inundated into the whole world of motivation. A few years later, he met the co-founder of neuro-linguistic programming, who came up with that, John Grinder. NLP, and so they partnered up, and Tony Robbins and John Grinder partnered, and he started teaching NLP. So the combination of NLP and motivation is still what he does today, and you can look all that stuff up. Later on, of course, he started making millions of dollars, and he talks about having washing his dishes in a bathtub and living in a 400 square foot bachelor apartment, and the guy's like, 9 feet tall, and so a small place for a big guy, but he got motivated and went on to counsel presidents and entertainers and athletes, stars of their fields in all the world, and he's actually got his start. I skipped a part. Got his start in the big time, got his big break when he gave a testimonial on a Guthy-Renker infomercial. Now, nowadays, you might know the name, especially if you're a fan of infomercials like me, Guthy-Renker. They have some big brands, including the biggest Proactive, which is now a billion-dollar brand. That's Guthy-Renker and a bunch of other infomercials. And this was Guthy-Renker's very first, that's Bill Guthy and Greg Renker, direct response marketing superstars, got their first ever infomercial was for Napoleon Hill's Think and Grow Rich. And Tony Robbins was just one of the people in that half-hour infomercial giving a testimonial about it. And the tracking showed that the response to Tony Robbins' testimonial was the time in the infomercial when the most sales came flooding in. And so that response was so great that Guthy-Renker then figured out a way to get Tony Robbins onto his own infomercial. And so they came up with this power talk, power play, power whatever it was, personal power. Tony Robbins' personal power. I even bought the thing, like, 15 cassette tapes, I think it was back then. And I listened to that over and over in the car. And anyway, millions and millions of dollars in sales, and really launched Tony into the big-time world where he is today of living a fantastic life on his own terms, and he owns an island down in the South Pacific somewhere or whatever, and he has seminars for thousands of dollars, and people pay him tons of money, and he advises presidents and big-time entertainers and sports athletes and all that kind of stuff, and he's still a young kid. He's my age. He was born on leap year in 1960, so that's only about a little less than 3 months older than me. And what the heck, you might ask, is up with me? I've been on this earth only 3 months less than Tony Robbins. I don't own an island in the South Pacific. I don't advise millionaires and billionaires and presidents and top entertainers and athletes. I advise you, dear viewer, watching this video. So I am not the subject of today's Success Story Saturday. Got a long way to go, but I love my life. And I love what I do, and I consider myself a success, at least in that right. So that's it for today for Success Story Saturday. Now go watch this, quote, fight where a boxer is matched against someone who's not a boxer, and supposedly that's some kind of a contest that we're thinking it will actually, like, we wonder who's going to win that thing. So go enjoy it, and I'll be back tomorrow with Sunday Fun Day, which will include me eating crow if somehow this guy who has never been in a boxing match in his life can beat a champion boxer. I will be sharing that tomorrow. So check in with me then, and thanks for being here.